Welcome to Purpose 360. And today I have such a delight because I have both a phenomenal colleague, a dear friend, someone who actually we do some collaboration together, Balaji Ganapathy. He was the former head of CSR and social impact for TCS, Tata Consultancy Services. For how many years were you at Tata, Balaji?
21 years.
21 years. And very exciting. He has gone out on his own now to create what he says is the company that he feels is going to help us fill those gaps in social impact and in ideas and scale. It's called Social Positive. We're going to get into that. But welcome back to the show. He's been a frequent guest, whether it's a full podcast. Our first one was May 2020, right when COVID's hit. And then we've done others since. So welcome back to the show, Balaji.
No, it's a pleasure to be back, Carol. You're so generous and kind, and I truly value the friendship and the partnership that we have. Each time I come on the show, I'm at a different chapter in my life. The first time, as you said, it was building a purpose-driven organization on the legacy of 150 years of history at the Tatas. The second time was my own social impact journey of looking at what I learned and scaling and growing the impact globally. And now I'm building something new. So it's great to be back. But one thing I was thinking in preparing for today, that the core has not changed, right? So who I am, I've always been somebody who built organizations, teams, and leaders who serve society and the planet with humility and a pioneering spirit. And that has been the through line. And so I asked myself why I do this work. And, it's a conviction that I formed very early that everybody is born with equal potential, but not equal opportunity.
Right.
And the realization that access to opportunity is the great equalizer is why I do the work that I do.
And I love, and he's amazing. He's this most amazing human being. As a friend, as a colleague, he's so generous and humble and smart as a whip. Always envisioning the future. So I love talking with him and working together. And I know listeners and viewers, you're going to love this conversation today. I love that you said in the past that everything in my life has led me to where I am today. And so I want to start with your parents and growing up. And a little bit, I always feel that we are so shaped by our early, youth experiences. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Wow.
Short,
Absolutely.
though.
I'm getting emotional because I think I don't see our identity as a point in time, but as layers of earth, right? So we are, all these layers that have been heaped on top of each other, and every layer adds to our roots. And, thinking back to growing up in Trivandrum, which is a small town in the southern part of India, I was born into a joint family of about 40 people. And we had modest means, but boundless generosity. Growing up, I don't remember buying a new book or clothes because, you had cousins who would hand it down, or neighbors who would give you comic books, or my parents' office network, where, we would go during the summer break and knock on doors of his colleagues and get the books from their kids. So, those experiences early on definitely showed me that scarcity, the scarcity was there, but the scarcity taught me something that abundance never could have. That dignity is not diminished by sharing, right? It is, in fact, multiplied by it. And, along with that came this urge to travel and see the world. And I did that. I had the blessing of being able to do that in the general compartments of trains in India in the 90s. And as a teenager, traveling all across the country, crisscrossing the network of the old Indian railways, I pressed shoulder to shoulder with migrant workers, farmers, everyday people, students, old people, young people, people from different cultures and languages. And I could see the real world. I saw India, as
Mm,
they call today Bharat, right? Today is a story of Bharat and India. Bharat, which is more of rural India, and India, which is the urbanized version that you see today. So I could see not the India of the headlines, but the India of, in reality. And I can tell you that's the same experience I've had traveling around the world in US, in Australia and Canada, Mexico, other places too. People who had nothing
mm,
were willing to share everything, right? So that, looking back 30 years, uh, or more, I think those journeys really crystallize something that it took me decades to articulate.
mm.
What I shared, that equal, we are born with equal potential but not equal opportunity, and access to opportunity, and how to help people, empower them to get that access to opportunity, became my North Star.
I love that. Access to opportunity became your North Star. So I want to talk about some of the twinkling of that star and your background, because you've got a background in engineering, you've got a background in HR, and then ultimately you became the lead in terms of social impact and purpose at TCS. So can you talk about how a little bit about each one of those areas contributed to your North Star today?
Yeah, it is not by design, it was by accident. I would say that I am where I
Excellent.
am today, but intentional accidents. I would say
Hmm.
intentional choices made over a period of time. So I was an engineer, an entrepreneur, a HR leader, then technologist, a business leader, and then I got into social impact, right? So there are two moments I think that were very pivotal when I look back at what made me choose the path that I am in today. The first one was when I was studying engineering at the College of Engineering, Trivandrum. In the 90s, I had this crazy dream that we could design a car that used hydrogen and oxygen and created clean drinking water as its emission. Uh,
Amazing. Okay.
yeah. We knew nothing about the world. Internet was just not even, publicly available. It was just coming up. So sustainability was not a buzzword. It didn't exist as a something that you would recognize writ large today. So it was very hard to bring that idea to life. Went and knocked on many boardrooms and tried to pitch that idea with plant floor managers, with leaders, sales, and it didn't work. And we tried to pivot it to energy management and tried the same
Mm,
concept there. It was well accepted, but only as research. So, what it taught me is that any innovation is only as good as it is adopted. Technology does not
right.
change the world,
Hmm.
people adopting technology change the world. So
Ah,
I
ah.
added this layer of, from engineering and entrepreneurship to people. I
Hmm.
always had this interest, organizational design, organizational history. I used to read corporate history, good to great, all of that, was that period of time. And I started moving from machines to human systems. So that is point number one. The second pivot came much later on, 10 years into TCS or so, after my initial entrepreneurship days. And I came into US just as the great financial crisis was unfolding in early 2009, right? So my first week on the job, I was driving through the streets of Detroit where you
Mm,
know things were boarded up and the downtown looked like a ghost town. And it was a hard landing, and it was a wake up call. It was an economy in free fall. It was a new role. TCS was doing great work. Tata was doing great work globally. But growing our business here was the goal. And
hmm.
pairing up with the business leaders to do that, or domain leaders and functional leaders to do that, was my job. But I realized that what the country needed, what the community needed at that time, people did not need to see the solutions that you bring to the table. They
Hmm.
wanted to know whether you're trustworthy and bring value. And
Yep.
that crisis then became a catalyst. So I started building strategic partnerships with internal leaders who believed in putting community at the center. And I learned that other companies had the same.
Mm,
So, it just became an extension of doing business together, but also doing work to uplift the community together. And that is bought over a period of 10 years. I saw business grow from 3 billion to 10, 12 billion in the geography itself. And so companies that serve society together do not just survive downturns, they emerge stronger. And
Yes.
that brought in that conviction to help me move from the business facing role to more of leading social impact and where I am today.
And it's interesting because there's likely an analogy, an analog to our current economic and political situation where there's a huge headwind in terms of purpose and relationships and community. So I'm just curious. I'm going to jump. That was a question way near the end, but I'm going to jump into it now. We are, for the first time, at least in my career, and it's over a 40-year career, I've seen a really heavy headwind about don't talk about social impact, don't talk about D&I. You're going to get in trouble for D&I. You may lose a government contract. What are you saying? Because you have such a huge network of your colleagues, and they're coming to you and they say, Balaji, you went through 2009, you've been around for forever. What should we do now? Should we green hush? Should we stop what we're doing? Should we continue? What do you say to your colleagues?
Look, I think every company wants to not only survive but thrive. And if you really look at the statistics first before going to the emotional part of it, um, uh, in the late 50s, every company that average lifespan of a S&P 500 company used to be about 50 years, right?
Mm,
So you're building institutions that are long lasting, therefore you're ascribing a long-term value to it and valuing it in today's terms. And that's how the market functions, right? The economy functions based on what happens today. The market functions based on what is expected in the next 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 years at least. And it is interesting that today the average lifespan of a S&P listed company is only 14 years.
you're
So
right.
what are you building? Are you building something that's going to come alive and then snuff out within the span of a decade or a decade and a half? So that's the logical part of it. The emotional part of it is that the lessons learned from what I saw in 2008 are that, um, you know, any organization, if you put the needs of whom you're serving at the center of what you're doing, that is the
Mm-hmm.
greatest place to start. With the Tatas, it was a 150-year history of community at the center. I'm not saying you have to just say altruistically that community is at the center. A lot of people today are, like you said, saying that no, doing business itself is philanthropy. That's the way of serving society. Yes, if you put the interests of whom you are serving at the center of what you're doing, not interests of just people who want to create wealth in the short term,
Mm-hmm.
and the company runs out in 10 to 14 years, right? So if you shape it in that way, the reframing that you can do is, do you want your company to do well in the short term and long term? Yes. Do you want your employees to feel like they have a home where they belong and the culture is strong so that you don't have to enforce a way of doing things? It becomes organically the how the company operates. Yes. uh, do you want the extension of who you are seen in the community as a good citizen, somebody who contributes to the community, somebody who contributes to the country, contributes to society, upholds basic values? I think everybody would say yes, whether
Mm,
it is behind closed doors. If you take the labels away and just look at
right.
the work, everybody
Right.
would accept that. And then if you do all of this, you are going to shine in the marketplace and you're going to shine in the workplace and in the community. So it's a no brainer. Drop the labels, do the work. This is what I am
I,
seeing
I love
CEOs, good
that.
CEOs, and good board members doing already. And that's the way to look at it beyond the short term haze of
Mm-hmm.
what is happening with the backlash. And some backlash is good because we bundled a lot of things with things that don't actually represent, like purpose washing was happening. We have to accept that. Some companies were doing the right thing. Some companies were just issuing press releases. And today they have had to account for what did you do against those aspirations, against
Right.
those big proclamations. ESG, people started bundling regular organizations with in funds with companies that were certified and SBTI standards and all of that, right? So there is method to what the reactions are. Yes, the pendulum is swinging the other way, but I think if you drop the labels, do the work, and think both short term and long term, you'll ride through the wave and come out stronger.
Yeah. I love the line, drop the labels, do the work, because it's like logo soup out there in terms of what are you doing, what does it mean, et cetera. And I always say, whomever you're working with, what are the objectives? What are the goals? What are the outcomes that you seek? Try and understand the definitions, because everyone's got a different name, a different label. So thank you for that. You have in the past, you have declared purpose is the new tech. Now, in this Trump world, geopolitics, war in Iran, AI everywhere, data centers taking over all of our lands, is purpose the new tech still part of your philosophy? And if it is, what does it mean?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I'm doubling, tripling down on that because see, what is your reason for existence? Right. So that doesn't change just because of what's happening externally. You adapt to what is changing externally. So every company, I saw it in my lifetime working with TCS as a company that was leading technology and helping companies across the world, across all kind of sectors and domains, adopt technology. What I saw is the power of originally enterprise systems. Then in the early 2000s, 2010s, you could see social, mobile, analytics, cloud coming through.
Right.
And then when tech became a buzzword, every company wanted to be a tech company, right? The Airbnb model, the Netflix model, etc. But in doing what they're doing, what they were really doing is to embrace technology to make it easier for them to live their purpose, right? However they define it. So technology, as I said, does not create longevity. Purpose creates longevity. So the example I gave of Fortune 500 companies lasting 50 years versus 14 years. So if you really look at what purpose can unlock, it's not a trade-off. It is what I call the value quad, right? You have business growth, employee purpose, community impact, and shareholder returns. All four can rise at the same time. And, we are living example of that. I saw that for 21 years at TCS. We saw 30 times revenue growth.
Okay? 30 times revenue
growth in that 21 years.
Right.
We saw $21.3 billion in brand value. So it's not, it's great shakes. Yes. We saw 4,457% market returns during that period. And at the same time, we had 20 million volunteer hours and 30 million lives touched by our community programs. So it is not a trade-off. We saw over 82% employee retention. I can rile off these numbers, but it is the realization, whether it is logically or in terms of evidence or in terms of emotion, you bring all of that together. Purpose is not a cost center. It is a growth engine. You have to accept the fact, yes, purpose is not a cost center. It's a growth engine. So purpose is the new tech, whether it is the tech is enterprise systems in the early 2000s, the social media, analytics and cloud in the 2020s, or AI today. The technology that comes may change, but why you exist and how you can serve your most important stakeholders, that doesn't change. So that's what is leading me to believe that every enterprise, if you want to last and bring your purpose to life, you have to create an organization that's carbon negative and social positive. There is no way around it.
Right. So, okay, you were very fortunate to grow up in the Tata Group, perhaps the world's foremost, oldest purpose at the center organization. So now you've got a new company, Social Positive. We're going to talk about that. But you're always out speaking. You're at conferences. You're talking with your colleagues. And I know with great love and affection, they look at you and go, oh, my God, you've done such amazing work. You talked about some of those outcomes. But I don't work in a company that has the history and the ethos and the soul of Tata. how can I, we're doing, they're more of a siloed, we've got the foundation and we're donating
Mhm.
over 10 or 20 million a year. We're really making impacts, but I'm not at the center. How do I move my C-suite along? I know it's a tough question. How do I move my C-suite along so that we move to be part of strategy day in and day out? We are not the afterthought. What do you say?
It's easy and hard.
Okay. It's easy and hard.
So the easy part is that purpose cannot live in a department, right? So whether it is the foundation, CSR, social impact, sustainability, ESG, whatever you call it, cannot live in a department. It has to live in the DNA and the operating model of the organization, right?
Yeah.
So for me, yes, the legacy was there, and it was a blessing, right? We could not have done what we did without the team. We could not have done what we did without the rich history and the values that preceded us for 150 years. But yet, it's a growing organization. I started when we were 20,000 people. When I left, we were 600,000 people. So you have to be
Crazy.
at it. So the hard part is doing the work day in and day out. How do you
Mm-hmm.
integrate these 600,000 employees? How do you integrate 48 business units? We had 2,000 customers or so. How do you bring all of them together in the form of a purpose ecosystem that's actually
Right.
serving societal challenges? I think when you shift from thinking about how do I make the case for my program, my initiative, and get a sign off, but
Mm-hmm.
I started seeing it that way. It was like seeing the matrix that, yeah, I may have limited resources. When I started, we had limited resources. But then I looked at the organization. No, it's a huge organization. Why am I thinking of my few member team or a few $1 million as the resources? Every of the 600,000 people is part of the CSR and the impact team. All the 48 business units are part of the team. 2,000 customers are part of the team. So when you think
Mm.
like that, you start to think in
Right.
abundance. And
Right. Right.
then came the
Yep.
650 million and the 30 million lives across 55 countries. So what is the lesson? The lesson is you need to, of course, have great interventions and programs and solutions that you think addresses where need is high, resources are low, and only your organization can make a difference. That is
Mm-hmm.
necessary, right?
Right.
But then you take your organization, its people on that journey. So, for example, adult literacy was a program that our first CEO conceived 25 years ago. But we evolved it to be literacy as a service where
Mm-hmm.
employees, partners, other companies, government, all of them could participate and evolve from literacy to livelihood. And we reached 2.4 million lives in a very short period of time, scaled it up uh, not because the legacy and history was not there, it was there,
Mm-hmm.
but because we started integrating intentionally each of these folks in what the need was, where they are good at. Similarly, Go IT and Ignite My Future, we brought computational thinking to 5 million people, students, especially girls, especially minority youth in rural and underserved parts of the world. The lesson from that, you cannot do it alone, right? So, how do you partner with organizations, whether it is government? The Obama White House is very open to doing that. We work with them. Department of Education, even under Trump administration, wanted to do certain things. We worked with them. So you don't think about it in terms of ideological terms. You think about it in terms of what your end beneficiaries, your stakeholders
Right.
need, and
Mm-hmm.
how do you bring and mobilize resources to support that. And most of the work we didn't do it alone. Yes, we had programs that directly reached people and school systems and partners, but we did it as a larger community,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we always measured outcomes. So the lessons, if you want to see it, it's yes, the legacy of community not being a single stakeholder was there, but the
Right.
lesson is that you have to put yourself in the shoes as the CEO of an organization that extends much beyond your team, and with
Mm-hmm.
humility,
Exactly.
and say
Right.
that these are the resources that I have available and these are the problems I am best set up to solve. And how do I start creating programs, creating institutional mechanisms and processes that can outlive me to serve then the rest of it? Yes, challenges will be there, but you'll make considerable progress.
Wonderful.
And
Let me ask you. Let's about partnerships because I know
Yeah.
when you talk about social positive, and you say you've had conversations with thousands of people and you've had over 200 different partnerships and such. Can you give 2 or 3 secrets to your success with partners?
Whew. We are diving into really good territory here. I think every practitioner will recognize what I'm able to describe or are going to describe now, that you have conviction, you have data,
Hmm.
you may have the board support, but the gap between strategy on paper and programs on the ground is where we
Right.
spend most of our careers, right? So
Right.
convincing leaders, that's what I said, was the easier part. The harder part is building the operational rhythm to make it happen, right?
Right.
So, what do you need to make it work along with partners? One, shared measurement across teams. That's a
Great.
must. If you
Okay.
report certain things to your board and then you ask your partners to report other things, they have other things that they report to other set of stakeholders or part of a collective, it's not going to work. You have to get together, look at the problem in a value chain, and then really say what are the measures that we need to go after, and be humble enough to say that we don't need to measure the whole world. We need to
Right.
measure
Right.
these things, and these are
Hmm.
the things that are going to matter. But establish that across the teams. Second is building an operational cadence that connects strategy to frontline execution. Don't stop
Okay.
at just giving grants, issuing RFPs, and being happy about identifying good organizations. Help them
Hmm.
with the frontline execution, because mostly the lessons that you and your organization has on how to unlock last mile issues is not something that a small community organization or a medium sized nonprofit will have. So
Hmm.
if you are there as a partner, not as a
Right.
sponsor or a grantor, I think the equation changes, right? The third, and I would say the most important thing is in partnerships and making this work, is building leaders at every level who
Ah.
feel ownership of the mission, right? So I used to ask myself every day when I wake up in the morning, when I look at myself in the mirror, am I working for the CSR team? Am I working for TCS? Am I working for the community? Am I working for society at large?
And
Right?
you
So
say, oh,
society at large,
oh,
absolutely.
society at large. Okay.
That comes first. Then
Okay.
comes the community that
Hmm.
we have identified to serve. Then comes the company that I work for. Then comes the team. So you always have to defer to the larger mission that you are out there to serve. Because, say, for example, if you have program teams and marketing teams, for example, if they wake up in the morning, they think that my job is to market, my job is to do the program, then
Hmm.
you're losing sight of what they call the bricklayer versus the cathedral builder, right? Both of them are having bricks in hand and putting it against the wall. But one thinks that they're, just laying bricks. The other thinks they are building cathedrals. And the
Right.
difference is that ability to envision what that end goal, that mission is going to lead to. And
Right.
it is our responsibility. And I'm not saying this is a power dynamic from company to nonprofits. Actually, greatest lessons I have learned have been on the field, taught by
Hmm.
people who may not be having the title of leaders, but they are the ones who are owning their destiny and helping others around them. So, how do we empower and build leaders at every level? We have to own that. So, those are the three things, right?
I love it.
Shared
Yep.
measures,
Hmm.
operational cadence for frontline execution, and leaders at every level.
And then I want to add something else that's secret sauce for you,
Okay.
which is one of your principles, your guiding principles. And it's called servant leadership. And so I think that it's not just those 3 principles, but it's how you, the leader or the owner of this initiative, or, that's your job to, bring this purpose to life, create it. So explain servant leadership, because, we hear it with Paul Pullman and we've heard it with a few others, but it's
Hmm.
really, really critical.
No, it is. It is. It's simple in the end, right? So, a servant leader is somebody who empowers others to succeed, so that your success is defined by their success and collective success. It's as simple as that. And I think it may sound crazy or philosophical. Artemis 2 has just come back from circling the moon, so it's a good time to talk about
Right.
this. Did you, know that we are just a tiny speck? We tend to,
Right.
fill ourselves with this self importance. But if you really think about it, we are but a tiny speck of cosmic dust in a galaxy that is surrounded by other galaxies,
Yep.
which is part of a cluster that's surrounded by superclusters and billions of them, so far that we cannot even see beyond the viewable or the recognizable universe, right? So, I mean, what are we talking about? We are not going to take the name and fame with us. It's good to have momentarily, and some may need it as an elixir or a fill me up to move forward. That's totally fine. But if you look beyond that, um, and I have experienced this. Stepping away from TCS, I realized that what endures is not the title, it is not the name and fame, it is the relationships that you build, it is the people that you enjoy working with. Why are you and I talking today? It's not because I'm in some position, it's because we enjoy working together, serving together. And I think that's the principle of serving leadership, building others to succeed together, building teams that builds other teams, building institutions that builds other institutions. So, and that is how the fabric of society and social infrastructure can be built in any, whether you're a faith leader, whether you're a corporate leader, whether you're a community leader, those principles translate. So, yeah, I would still consider myself to be a student of that space.
Great. No, I love that. So we're going to skip by now this incredible 21-year career, all the different things you achieved, great awards. I mean, in terms of like the Civic 50 and I mean, what, TCS achieved. And now all of a sudden you had that itch. You had certain things happening in your life and whatever, and you're going, can you develop something new? There are gaps. There's a gap out there. And can you fill a gap to help this field that you love so much move forward? And I love that. And by the way, we'll put in the show notes, we're going to put a connection to your website, your new website. But I love that you say it's built from 26 years inside the system. And that you asked yourself, your thesis was, what could you build if you started from everything that you had learned? So, and then you say you were born from patterns repeating across 55 countries and over, almost 200 partnerships, thousands of conversations with leaders who described, and I love you said this, the same frustrations. So now Social Positive it's over a year old now. How old is it now?
Yeah, it's nearing a year.
Oh, they're happy. Okay, happy birthday. So I would love you to say, you saw this gap, you had all these learnings. Tell us about Social Positive. And then we'll get down deeper into some of the offerings because they're astounding. So tell us about your new company.
I shared this with you. I'm happy to share with the audience that, I didn't start out to start a company, right? I looked at where is it that the need is highest, resources are lowest, and my experience and my background can make a difference. So I had to eat my own dog food, right? So the same principle I applied. And I always enjoyed the best times where working with field staff, working with leaders in this space, not as sage on the stage, but in close quarters. And in talking to leaders in this space all around the world, in the US, some of the network is so generous to open their doors and continue to welcome me well beyond my time at TCS. I saw that they all recognize the same four disconnects and frustrations. I saw it for 26 years. I saw it in 55 countries. And these patterns are not because somebody is doing something wrong, but I recognize that it is structurally a problem. Now, hear this. If we were to think of social impact as a country, it is a $2.3 trillion economy. That's what I discovered when I did the research. So $2.3 trillion flows into social capital through domestic philanthropy, through ODA, through cross-border philanthropy, through impact investing and all that, but that's higher than or nearer to a Brazil or a Canada, right? So you should have the kind of outsized outcomes that exist for those countries. And then I realized that that is not the case. And that is when I started to name and label the four gaps that I believe are keeping us from good intentions to good actions to good impact, right? So first is needs to funding. What I saw is that capital flows towards where funders live and operate, not always towards where the need is the highest. I think we subliminally recognize this, right? Yes, we have a responsibility to the community where our offices are, our employees live, absolutely. But to recognize that, for example, in the US, rural communities are home to about 19% of Americans, but receive only 3 to 7% of the philanthropy grants. I mean, it blew my mind to really put the numbers and recognize that 3% of the overall 2.3 trillion capital is only flowing to 10% of the people who need it. So it's a $160 billion gap for the poorest of the poorest who have the least means. It should be disproportionate. I looked at India, same kind of issue. Maharashtra, which is one of the most prosperous states in the country, receives 23 times more impact funding, CSR funding, than Bihar, whereas Bihar is 5.5 times more poor. So to summarize, what I saw is it's not about blame. It is proximity is where you start to give, and we can change that. So that is the first pattern. Second pattern was we have great intentions, but 83% of organizations say that impact is a priority, which is great, right? But only 25% are achieving measurable progress. So the gap is not about intention. It is good intention, generosity is there. I've met the leaders, I've sat in those seats. But translating strategy to operational programs on the ground is not easy. It took us a year and a half to build the operational infrastructure, even at TCS, a great organization that has everything aligned in terms of wanting to do the right thing. It takes time to build that. And often our systems are geared towards organizations that are people that build strategy, but very little infrastructure on how to translate it to execution on the ground. So that's the second gap, strategy to execution. Third is implementation to impact. What I saw is most of us are measuring and reporting outputs, right? And it is a pet peeve. I know in the conferences we go to, we sit in the sidelines and say, hey, what can we do to bring about a system or a framework that can change what we are measuring and reporting? Only 86% of organizations, when I tracked, are tracking only outputs. Only 14 are measuring outcomes. And even lesser are looking at long-term impact that is causal, right? So the leaders know this. They want to measure outcomes. I think we have good solutions, but the systems are not making it easy. So that is the third pattern I saw, implementation to impact. And the fourth one is evidence to scale. And this is what hit me hardest in the last 5 years or so, especially after COVID, when I started going and visiting with others who are doing great programs on the ground, whether it is in the field in India, in the US, as I said, Australia, Mexico, so many places, Philippines. I went and spent time on the ground. And I saw that solutions existed. For example, ultra poverty. There is a proven solution from 22 years ago. Why is it that we have not solved for poverty? I know a lot of people would have the same angst and ask the same question. Because the system that is built to show pilot success is not the system that is required to scale at population level. So it takes 17 years on average to move from proven pilot to population level adoption. Not because evidence is weak, because the systems for scaling, the funding bridges, the policy partnerships, the leadership capacity, they're not in place. So these are the four patterns: funding to needs, strategy to execution, implementation to impact, and evidence to scale. And that is what led to the birth of Social Positive. You asked me about the birth date. Yes, I had thought of doing something from Feb of last year, but really it came into being late September to the end of last year because the practitioners and the leaders whom I surrounded myself with listened to, heard from, attended conferences, meetings, closed door sessions. That is what I took away. I spent time with the World Bank. I spent time with the UN, with the World Economic Forum, all global forums, Asian forums, US forums, European ones. This is the synthesis. So that is what led to the birth of Social Positive. This is the market gap. Everybody is working towards each of these four gaps individually, but there is a need for connective tissue. Right? In our lifetime, we want to see impactful change happen at scale. So who doesn't want grassroots impact at population scale? It is all of our. I'm just verbalizing it and providing a space where I believe we can do it together.
And you've got some amazing services that I want to really briefly touch on, but I'm curious about So you've put this together, you've launched the site. The site is beautiful, it's simple, it's very clean. And you always say, should we have a conversation, which I love. What is the marketplace? What are your colleagues saying? I mean, I know it's extraordinary, but what are others saying about social positive so far?
It's been a privilege to really be welcomed with open arms from so many practitioners, leaders, domestically and globally. And like I said, we are not trying to pitch to be better than somebody else. That's not the goal. There is enough organizations doing great work in this space. How can we bring them together and build the connective tissue and the bridge?
Mhm.
And that is, I think, the first thing that everybody appreciates, right? The second is, and I tell this with a lot of emotion, because what I saw is that, you know when I left TCS and started to think about what to do for myself, I realized that this is a path that a lot of similar leaders who have been in corporate or foundations for a long term want to do something different and don't have a path for it, right? In
Mhm.
every other executive function, let me ask you, Carol, right? If you are a CEO, you move to boards. If you are a CFO, you become an independent consultant. If you are a CMO, you join agencies or advisory firms, right? And there is an infrastructure that welcomes that
Yeah,
experience and values
right.
that experience. And I won't tell you who, but in confidence, I saw someone whose benefits itself was at risk because they didn't know what to do next, and they had no other choice, right? So we shouldn't be in this place as a sector. So that's
Mm.
something that I hope I am talking to people about. That that's not a solution I have today, but I hope through social positive to build the AI infrastructure so that the administrative, research, marketing, and basic capabilities that is required for us as leaders to function at a high level
Mm.
exists. So I think that is what I'm hearing back from leaders. And I think there is resonance to the thesis, there is resonance to bridging the gaps, and there is resonance to the fact that AI is not in the foreground but in the background.
Right.
Yeah, the practitioner knowledge and wisdom is what is there in the foreground. And so I always will believe that it is built by the sector for the sector. Social positive is always going to be about that, built by the sector for the sector. So how can we welcome everyone who's a leader in the space with open arms to come
Mhm.
and share and build together?
So, yeah, thank you for bridging into the AI discussion, and that we all need to advance our skills using AI, but bringing the humanity of what we bring and our strategy and our ability to execute. I don't think AI will ever replace the ability to find the partners, work with the partners, gain the impact, especially in the last mile. And to any of our listeners, we also just wrote, Carol Cone on Purpose just wrote a guide for purpose and AI, and we're going to put that in the show notes because we wrote that again to share with everybody struggling with how do I apply this dramatically, this transformation in our work. So I love that you describe social positive as AI native impact consultant, and you have used AI for some of your core services. So, can you explain your vision? And then also, I know that you've got the collective, which is really interesting. That's kind of taking the wisdom of all of us. You've got Impact Scape, which is amazing in terms of really putting together very large ideas. And then you've got Social Positive Labs. So can you briefly, because I know we could have this for very long and we can do a part two for this conversation, but talk about the three services and how they are, dare I say, dynamically using AI to advance our work.
Yeah, happy to, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm going to turn it to you for in between, but let me start by saying that AI native can sound like a jargon. So I want to make it very real in terms of what is the practitioner's aspect of it, right? Well, how do you put it in practice? How do you build tools? My goal is that every practitioner in this space should have the collective intelligence, the analytical power, and the wisdom of those who came before us, right? That's how we start our journeys. I remember when I started my social impact journey, going to and talking to people like Bo Miller and Rob, and I mean so many others, to you and several others in this field so many years ago. And today, a lot of the people who want to do work in this space don't have that ability to do it, right? So the collective is a way to really bring practitioners together to not share speeches in a conference, but really share answers to hard questions that are difficult to solve for, right? So it is a community of practice, a community of practitioners, and instead of what just going and living in a moment, which is definitely required, whether it be in a podcast or a conference. What if it could harness all of that and build the insights from that, right? So if 10 of us have similar insights on how to deal with a board or with making the case to our executives, that should be shared intelligence that is open to all in our sector, right? If we have insights on how to help nonprofits identify and get grants, we should be able to share it with a larger group of nonprofits, thousands of nonprofits, so that they can level themselves up against well-resourced organizations who can make those grants and those proposals, right? So the collective is a way to share open intelligence across the network, and I welcome anyone who's listening, anyone who wants to join to be part of it. Now, Impactscape and Rika are really products of what an extension of what I saw is required for each of us as a leader to operate well, right? Now, if you are a business leader, if you are going into a market, like I said, if you think of yourself as a CEO of a community and helping solve problems for the community, you are accountable to that community.
Right.
So first and foremost, you ask yourself the question, where does the need exist? Where is the capital flowing, right? When I ask myself the question, the $2.3 trillion and where it flows, that is the first version of Impactscape, and that's available for everyone to see and experience. I would welcome, listeners to go and experience that at a global level. But then at your own, sitting in the seat that you're sitting, if you're sitting in a corporate, if you're sitting in a foundation, in a nonprofit, a family office, and you're working in a state, you're working in 10 counties, you're working in 3 countries around the world, you ask yourself the question, do I have a real view of what the market space is? And nothing exists today, right? You have to wait for 3 months and commission a project to do this. Yes, it's good to do, and that's necessary, but that should not be where the effort is put. This is intelligence that is available. What Impactscape does is to bring it together. So what government is doing in terms of helping citizens through its social services, what is the gap that then exists at a state, county level, or a federal level, state level, county level in the US, for example, or central, state, and district level in India, for example? What are the gaps that exist? What is the current level of capital that is flowing against that? If you want to work in elder care, you want to work in mental health, you want to work in education, you want to work in, gender. These are thematic areas where we have data available. So you can sit together with your leadership team and look at this and have a meaningful exercise of planning for where the need is highest, resources are lowest, and your capital and your resources can make a difference. That is what Impactscape can unfold. You don't need multi-million dollars to do this. I want to make this democratized so it's easy and accessible for those who need it. Because in our space, if you have this sort of tools, I wish I had this tool. We created something for ourselves at TCS because we have the technology capability to do it. The space needs it. Okay. Now I'm going to flip it to you. The third product, I spoke about Collective, I spoke about Impactscape. The third one I want to talk about is Rika, where AI is today hallucinating and providing responses that you can't rely on, you have low confidence on. Yet, your everyday challenges cannot be solved by consultants or by partners, right? You have to live as a leader, as a practitioner, you have to do your daily job. Right. So if you have questions and you ask generic LLM an answer, can you believe it? Can you trust it? But what if you could have access to curated, not the open internet, but curated materials, benchmarked research? You had access to practitioner knowledge and wisdom of those who came before you, benchmark data. And that is available as an AI ally. And I want to ask you, what was your experience with Rika, and what did you think stood out in terms of your interaction?
Well, with Rika, because you personally curated the resources, It wasn't something that, to your point about that AI would scrub the web and it would pull in resources, some that were true, some that were hallucinations. And I think that that's very special because you have taken, and this is not to be bragging, but this is to be in terms of the decades of experience you've had and your knowledge of what's available out there. So the trusted resources, the speed at which you can access it and feel confident about information you're getting back, again, to develop strategy and direction. It's not just an AI tool, it is using AI plus the human interaction and analysis for it. So I think it's extraordinary. And, it reminds me of way back when, in the early days of the internet, when Scott Kernett created something called the mining company. And the mining company
Mhm.
actually was totally counter to the internet. The internet was, well, you're going to scrub all this and get this information. And the mining company went, and Scott's a genius. And we got to work with him for many years, just loved the man.
Mm.
And he basically said, I'm going to have real people. They're miners and they're subject matter experts. And so somebody that does crocheting is going to know far more about crocheting than anything that can be found on the internet. So it's an interesting
Exactly.
analog, and that was 1998. So think how many years ago, and now we're fast forward with AI and social impact. So I think that Rika is an amazing product. We will put links again to Social Positive and your various entities in our show notes. I want to continue because you've been spending a lot of time in Asia,
Mhm.
and I think that that you're serving as a commissioner on the Commission for Asian Philanthropy. You've been bringing incredible foundations together and thought leaders in various venues to truly advance the practice of philanthropy and social impact in Asia. Give our listeners a little bit of a taste of what is happening in Asia and what your vision is for that commission.
Look, it's incredible challenge and an incredible opportunity. A lot of us don't realize, but 60% of the world population lives in Asia. So 60% of the challenges also exist there or more, right? So the beauty of Asia is that it is probably the only continent where needs are growing, but the resources to address those needs are also growing.
Mm,
So it is not a depravity. There is some abundance that is coming along with the challenges that exist. So one of the first learnings I had when I looked outside of India and started deep diving through the Commission on Asian Philanthropy's work into other jurisdictions, all the way from Japan to China to Hong Kong, Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Saudi, UAE.
mm,
Um, all of these are jurisdictions where millions of people live, right? And huge systems, financial systems, government systems, community systems exist. First and foremost thing I learned is Asian philanthropy is pluralistic,
mm.
right? So you cannot put it in a box and say that, oh, this is Asian philanthropy. It is extremely diverse, and that is its asset. The India model of corporate philanthropy through 2% CSR is what people hear, but India also
Right.
has a community driven model of 100 million people who are part of self help groups that is driving the agenda, right? And you have the institutionalization of zakat in places like Indonesia and Saudi, and you have digitalization of charity in China. You have organizations like the Hong Kong Jockey Club, which is a completely foreign concept to a lot of us in the West, right? Of how a company can create resources that can then serve society through its operations itself, right? And you have foundations that are based in Japan that are working on dormant accounts and helping government use those resources. The biggest wealth transfer that is existing. And then you have foundations who are based in Singapore that have a lot of family wealth and are looking to create impact. So it is very pluralistic. Each of these
Hmm.
models are extremely diverse. So rather than try to put it in a box, deep diving and understanding for what it is and how it is serving. So that's where I developed this understanding of the three engines of growth. So you have government, you have markets, and you have community, right? Community is not just social impact. Community has its own identity, right? So where markets are driving the agenda, companies can play a huge role in helping governments serve the community. Where government has a lot of resources, for example, places like China, others can join hands along with the companies can join hand along with government, and which is what is happening through a lot of gongos and state-owned enterprises where companies are partnering with them. Their community has a huge hand, like in Indonesia, where the Islamic giving through zakat and wakaf is actually getting mobilized
Mm.
and actually processed by the government at a central level to say that okay, 2.5% of the overall wealth is actually getting put into it individually. So collectively, if you look at it, how can we make plans for improving the community infrastructure? Uh, all of this is great, but what I love about it is the leadership, right?
Yeah.
So people don't stop at grants, although there is a lot of Western model adoption that is there, and for good measure, right? I think the governance systems of the West, the kind of approach of understanding and problem solving that exists, all of that is great. I think those models have created enormous good and has its place. But Asia for Asia recognizes that Asia has its own deep traditions of giving, right? Collective
Hmm.
stewardship that I explained, family-led philanthropy that spans multi-generations, faith-based giving, community-led models that are embedded in the fabric. So these we realized are assets to build on. So in the future, what the commission is looking to do is to look at how do you improve both the quantity and quality of philanthropy so that it can serve nation building and global agendas, right? Working alongside countries and regions, but also globally.
Great, great. I will love to have you back and really dive deeper into this, because the groups that you've brought together are, very, very impressive. We need to wind this down a bit, but I would like to ask a question I always ask for young people who want to get into this field. They want to be involved in social impact. They want to be involved in whatever, forget the label, but they really want to be involved in purpose. What are you suggesting to them today? It's a tough world. AI is eating up a lot of entry level jobs. And I'm sure you have a lot of young people that ask you for guidance. What do you say to them?
It's a great responsibility. I speak at Duke University every year and get asked this question. So I kind of prepared for it. I think, see, don't wait for the perfect job that combines career and purpose, right? So it's not like, okay, you do your part in your career and then you find your purpose. Start where you are, volunteer,
Mm.
build skills, observe, and you will find that there are certain things that
Exactly.
stick to you because it breaks your heart. And
Mm.
you will realize over a period of time that that is what you're uniquely positioned to fix. I love volunteering. I love going to community organizations and serving there. But I realized that I'm better at building teams and organizations that can serve that. And that's what helped me move in that direction, right? So purpose is not something you find. It is something you build one decision at a time. And that you fan the flame, right? And when you do that, have the humility to listen before you prescribe, right?
Ah,
It's a
sweet.
hard, polarized world. There are a lot of signals that are there, but there is so much of noise that you can get lost in the noise. So, having the humility to listen before you prescribe, this is what I learned from the best of the best leaders around the world. They learn from the communities before they build for them. So,
Right.
don't think of yourself as a messiah. Think of yourself as a servant who's there to serve the society and listen to the community. And when you do that, final thing is have the patience to build institutions, not just initiatives, right? So leaders who build other leaders, teams that build other teams. That is generational change. And that's the brand of leadership I would like to see in the world. Something that can help us generationally leapfrog.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so beautifully stated, but I also want to take you into the end where we ask really quick questions. And so you might have a one-word answer or a
Okay.
sentence. Okay. So the first question is, what's one word that best describes your work? And it can be social positive, it could be,
Leapfrog,
okay. Leapfrog.
uh, leapfrog together.
Leapfrog together. Never heard that. That's very unique, but of course you're very unique. Okay. What keeps you hopeful in the days that this work feels heavy?
I think the young people and those I meet on the field every single time, they have the answers, they have the aspiration. We are just the enablers.
Okay. What's one lesson you've learned from building purpose-driven systems at scale that you couldn't have learned anywhere else?
Hard to distill that into one word. Let me
You
try.
can do a sentence. A sentence is okay.
Programs fade, leaders endure.
Programs fade, leaders endure. That's a t-shirt. Programs fade. I love it. Okay, we're going to have to trademark that one. Okay. What's one small action people can take today to advance purpose or create impact in their own communities? One small action.
Well, if you put your hand up to do something, before you do it, ask the question, where is your current community investment going? And then ask the second question, is it matching where the need is the greatest?
Great. That's wonderful. And then the last thing is, if you could leave listeners or viewers with one idea or feeling today, what would it be?
I think it's a tough world out there, like I said, and you may feel at days hopeful, at days despondent. So you already have everything that you need to make a difference. I'm telling you, the world will survive, thrive, and yes, today may look hard. So the question is not whether you want to do something; it is where to begin. So start at the first step.
Start at the first step.
Start at the first social positive step.
There you go. I love that. Well, Balaji, you never, 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 ever disappoint. You're always giving more and give generously. It's been a phenomenal conversation. I always leave the last word to my guest. So how would you like to wrap this up? It's a lot to wrap up.
There's a lot to wrap up, but I just want to be grateful for the friends and network and leaders who have been in this place, who have continued to welcome me with open arms. And Carol, I want to thank you. I think you and I have spent a lot of time together over this past year, and it has been a blessing for me. You are one of the first people, I would say, who saw purpose not as a trend, but as a transformation. You pioneered this field before it had a name. So I think we owe it that you are continuing to help move this space. Social positive would not exist without people like you, mentors and friends like you, who have on whose shoulders I believe we are carrying this work forward. But I also recognize it's not a solo journey, and it's not a journey that's going to end. So I want to speak directly to everybody who's listening, who has spent years, maybe decades, building purpose-driven programs inside organizations and wondering what comes next. If you want to just chat on what you want to do next, always I'm here to talk to you. But if you are thinking about how you can build something together, channel everything you know. You're not alone. Social positive and concepts like this are built for you. Join the collective. It is open and welcome you. But last thing I want to say is that success to me is when we build leaders who build other leaders. We build teams that build other teams. We build institutions that build other institutions. That is the leapfrog together effect. That is the generational change. So my lessons of growing up in a modest, poor family in Trivandrum to a small town, White House Station, where I live with my family, where sharing books then and sharing experiences now, it's all the same. I think if I can sum up this whole time spent with you, Carol, grassroots impact, population scale, that's been the vision. And now we have a home for it. Come, let's do it together.
I love it. That's great. So please, that was beautiful. Thank you for your kind words. To get to your website, it's www.socialpositive.com. Is that correct?
It's https://socialpositive.org.
Okay, .org. Sorry, you're a .org.
We can put that in the...
Oh, we'll put that in the show notes. So that's great. Thank you. I mean, there is just so much that I continue to learn from you. You're such a joy. And you've contributed so much to the field, and I know that you have a lot more to do. So we look forward. We will have you back to talk about Asia and.
Oh, we do it together. Couldn't do it without you.